Hi everybody. I'm here with one of my good friends, an original badass, and Colby Raha, and we're here. It's mostly for surfing, like I was just telling him, but I feel like we want some motocross and skateboarding and possibly some snowboarders, just to keep it honest and colorful, so all the people get to hear stories from people who are badass around the world and at what they do. And Colby here is personally one of my favorite motocrossers. I don't know if you've watched him, but he does all the street stuff. First guy to do a handrail. He hits all the skate parks. He hits drainage ditches, airs off ramps and on ramps and freeways and trains and you name it. He's definitely like the urban assault master. And so,
Well, thank you.
also, not to mention, he has, world records in the quarter pipe and then going for the long distance world record. And on top of all that, he's just a super normal guy that will always pick up your call when you call, always answer. He'll come watch my kids at the skate park skate, and super personable. So we just wanted to get in touch with him and see what's going on in his brain. And first, and what I'd really like to say is thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, man.
Thank you for always being yourself and true to the core.
Well, I'm a big fan of the Fletchers, the whole family. You guys, you and your brother Christian, and then Grayson's killing it, and then now to see your kids killing it is awesome. And talk about dirt bikes. I don't know if people know this dude and his brother were badass dirt bike riders back in the day, hitting like huge jumps in Glamis, out in the hills in Beaumont, and then racing Supercross too. And then they were pretty much the first dudes to start quarter pipe and dirt hit cliff hits, which I'm sure they got from the surfing stuff. So grew up watching them and Crusty Demons.
Yeah. So what he's saying is he's the world record holder. He went 55 feet out of the quarter pipe for the Guinness Book of World Records. But who was the first person to ever do the quarter pipe on a
This
motorcycle?
The foot plant
Yeah.
180 quarter pipes was actually him. So pretty sick, man. Crusty Demons, him and the boys. So that was cool to grow up watching them, and then friends of friends through the dirt bike community. That's kind of how I knew of them.
So let's just get into the gnarliness of motocross, and hopefully you'll send us a couple clips. But
Yeah.
what was it like? Like, I want to say one of your heavier slams, but that downhill hit you've hit when you were a kid that Tyson filmed.
Off the cliff, right?
Yeah, hopefully we can get clips of
Yeah.
that.
So just being kind of young, I think I was 22 years old. Basically, like when you're that young, at least for me, I wanted to make a name for myself, kind of stand out, or do you have to do stuff that's gnarly to get people to know who you are? Because there's a bunch of people or kids or whatever around your age that are all really good riders, but to try to make a name or stand out was the goal. So I was jumping trains, just doing whatever I could to go bigger than the other guys. And then I got into real moto and I wanted to win, of course. So like the goal is to win. So what are you gonna do?
And what's real moto, real quick?
Real moto in X Games, it's like real street for skating, real snowboard, real snow. I think it is real BMX. It's just that's what that is, but for dirt bikes. So I just started. I already had things in mind to what to do, and that was one of the gnarliest ones. And I never measured it, and I went out and I started shoveling it, and it was so gnarly. I remember talking to Link Ogle, and he told me, "Hey, if you're gonna do it, don't do it last because if you get hurt, you're not gonna make it to X Games quarter pipe. You should just do it first and get it out of the way. So if you get hurt, you can heal and then finish your part and then get ready for X Games." So I did it first. Sure enough, I went down, broke my collarbone. Luckily, that was all I broke, and got it plated. Finished my part with like 3 weeks to film. We ended up getting third, but everyone in the comments said we should have won, so that was cool. And then I went to X Games and then won X Games that summer. So and then we got in real moto next year and won that year, and then won the year after, and then they discontinued it. So that's kind of the story behind that. It's just try to find gnarly stuff to like stand out. I thought I was gonna land it when I was building it, but then after I was in my gear and all the filmers were set up and it was time to go, I just remember sitting up there and looking down at it like this is way bigger than I like what I thought. Like it looked small when I was building it kind of. But anyways, it ended up being 110 foot.
110 foot. And so to put that in perspective, Robbie Madison jumped on New Year's Eve. What was the building?
Off of the was that
The
like the
Caesars?
Caesar's Palace arch? Like,
Yeah, so he jumped up, and then when he jumped down, that's a world record jump. And if anybody's ever seen it, Robbie Madison goes completely nuts and jumps off the building, which I thought was probably the craziest jump in motocross history, because stepping up is one thing, but jumping down and then landing and not going too far, overshooting it or under whatever, it just plays tricks on your mind. So it might be the same distance, but how far was Robbie's jump?
I think his was like 90.
90. So we're talking, if you watch Robbie Madison at Caesar's Palace on New Year's Eve, you watch that and you're like, holy smokes. But to put it in perspective, because what he's talking about is a dirt jump where you shovel it, you look at the landing, it's a kind of like a cliff to crevice to run out. And so
It's a one and done. We don't really get to practice, you know?
yeah, it's one and done, but it's 110 feet, and so that's 20 feet farther than what the world record is, the biggest jump ever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really give it people never really gave it justice, I feel like, because it was dirt and because it was just out in the hills, and his filmer Tyson was maybe 15 years old at the time, and so he was 22, so there wasn't all the preparation and all the logistics that go into like a big Red Bull jump at Caesar's Palace on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
So
no scaffolding and no training and going a little higher and weeks of practicing. It was just a big send, you know?
yeah, and so in a motocrosser's and a surfer and a skater's mind, a big send is in sense is not really as ballsy as you can get, and that's why it really caught my eye too. And I'll say, in my personal opinion, it's one of the greatest feats on a motorcycle that has definitely been overlooked. I'm sure some people, paid attention, but
I would say that out of like everything I've ever been asked, when I see people or whatever, the first thing they always ask me is, "Hey, that step down, what's up with that thing? That was crazy." So I actually do get a lot of people, but it looks bigger in person, I have to say too.
oh, so do the waves. So the wave, it's funny because it looks one way on a picture, and then if you get on the beach, you get kind of a clear vision. It looks a lot bigger. But then if you're just swimming and the wave's going to break on your head and just your head's out of the water, all of a sudden the wave gets 10 feet bigger. So there's multiple ways to look at these things. And if actually in person to picture, there's just no comparison.
Yeah. I mean, the big wave stuff to me, like I seen a picture the other day about, like, it was like a huge wave, dude surfing, and the reef was like this
Exposing, yes, Western Australia.
unreal. I compare, like, when we're going big out in the desert. I was just talking to somebody today. I said, it's kind of like big wave surfing, except you can't drown. But the only thing with dirt biking is we're like 2 hours from the closest anything, like road even. Like, we get so far out in the middle of the desert that if you crash out there, you're either calling a helicopter or your friend's got to load you up, or you ride back with a broken arm or whatever. So that's probably the only gnarliest thing about dirt biking way out in the hills.
But another thing is people don't think about it. It's your spinal cord's directly above your seat. And so when you land, the first thing you do is go to your butt, which compresses your spine. So it's kind of like, it's kind of a funny thing.
Different injuries all the time. I feel like my back's always hurting. My back was hurting so bad for like 3 weeks. I just wouldn't stop bitching about it. Every 30 minutes, I'm touching my toes. I'm all, fuck my back. My friends are probably tired of hearing about it. And I jumped off this roof recently on my dirt bike, and I landed so hard I heard my back go crack, and then I don't have any back pain now. So I don't know if they like cracked it back right or something. So
yeah. How many injuries do you think you have?
I didn't have really any injuries growing up racing. It was pretty much just like a couple concussions here and there growing up. But then, and then once I kind of turned pro and I started trying to do the X Games stuff, I broke my tib and fib, so I got rod and plates in there. Then I broke my, that collarbone was the second one, so that's plated. Then I broke my back and my pelvis in half when I cased that jump in my movie Narnia. My back shifted up, so they had to reset it and plate the front of my pelvis. I look like I got a C-section. And then 2 big screws the size of pencils in my back of my pelvis. And then chopped the top of my finger off. And knocked myself out like 8 or 9 times, I'd say, since I turned pro. And the last time I was unconscious for like 8 minutes. So I'm trying not to hit my head anymore because that. But
and you wonder why you got back pain.
And I got my shoulder. I just got my shoulder completely redone. Everything was totally demolished. All the tendons, it'd pop out just reaching around. like give my girl a hug and pop out. Just
Didn't it pop out at X Games? Didn't you tape it to yourself or something when you broke the world record?
yeah, it popped out like 4 or 5 days before X Games, just in Ventura last year, so 2023. So if you look at me, I don't know if you could tell, but I pretty much had my girl duct tape my arm to my side, so I'm riding like a T-Rex. Like I couldn't lift my arm up because I wanted, because it popped out right before X Games on the takeoff, not even landing, just the preload up the quarter pipe. It popped out, so I was in the air at my practice spot and landed with it out. So it was just janky. I mean, going into a quarter, last thing you want is your shoulder to pop out as you're taking off. When you're 56 feet is what I went over the top of the ramp. So that stuff, it's gnarly. It's comfortable.
And how big was the ramp?
The ramp's 18 foot tall, so 56 plus 18. I always forget. It's like 70 something feet.
So he was 70 feet above the concrete.
Yeah.
56 feet above the platform. I don't even know if they have platforms, but
Aaron like 40, 50 feet ish, or 40 to, I'd say 40 foot has become comfortable, like over the top of the coping. That's not too bad, but when you start getting into like where you need to go 50 feet to win, that's when it gets gnarly, because the compression of hitting the ramp so hard makes your body want to just explode on the impact of just taking off. And the landing's pretty rough too, but I'd say like just trying to keep your body from exploding from the takeoff is the hardest part. So I actually have to start like lifting weights and getting like fit, because if you don't, you're gonna fold. So it's come to that.
Yeah, you're getting old. It's painful. That's why I'm doing this right now. We're turning corners.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another thing. And the jump you cased it on, he has a landing ramp up there in Reno. And what's your goals with the long distance stuff? Because I know like Evil Knievel and our friend Trig and Robbie, all these people, they want a bunch of numbers. And so it's like if you do something of significance, and Trig, who is rest in paradise, but Trig, when he went 280 feet far, 277 feet far, and he went 80 feet high, he came home, and Evil Knievel was on his answer machine, became his promoter. But 280 feet's like, he still, I think, holds the highest for distance, not jumping over a canal straight above the land. But tell him what's in store, what you're planning to do, these crazy plans this man has, because I feel like it's really interesting.
So I feel like everyone always tells me, why do you want to do distance? It's, you could die doing it. Some people have died doing it, and I always tell them, it's like I feel like I excel in that type of riding. Like even on a BMX bike, I always like jumping down big stairs or launching far out of a park or whatever. But on a dirt bike, it's like I like to go huge. I'm not into technical stuff. Like I can do tricks, but it's not my style. So anyways, I actually feel like I really do love jumping far and big, and the only thing that scares me is a mechanical, like if your bike, like the chain snaps or something, going 100 miles an hour. Or I think I was going 85 miles an hour at the lip when I went 311 foot in the movie Narnia. But then the first time I hit it, which is how I broke my back and my pelvis and my shoulder, is I came up short. So it's really gnarly. You'd have to be on top of it with numbers. But what I'm kind of working on right now is we have that landing in Reno sitting out there. We got it permitted, so it's there. If I think we pitched it to X Games and a few other platforms that would take it on to have me go for the overall distance record. We have some stuff in play, but the stars have to align for that to come together, because I'm not going to do it for free. I won't even probably do it for 100,000 maybe, but at the same time, it's like you can if it's worth it, you get paid a couple 100,000. So that's just on the back burner to see if everything lines up, if they want to do it. Anyways, but for right now, I got property up in the.
But how far do you want to go?
Well, the record's 425, and I went 311, and I think that I feel comfortable enough to go over 425, because I did 311 in one day, and every single jump of mine felt so comfortable, and nothing got out of control. And it's not just me; it's the team. So like you have your the guy that with all the numbers, who Trigger Gum, Ryan Capes built the chart, and you're kind of following a chart. So it is skill, because you have to jump the bike, but it's really becomes a math equation, and that whole thing's really gnarly.
Because it's also the wind. you
There's
know,
a way
it's
you don't
distance
jump
of
in the
runway,
wind.
certain
Yeah.
gears, how many teeth are on your sprocket.
So we would go more like the surfer kind of route where it's like we jump when there's no wind, so there's a time slot. So like if they want me to jump at 6 p.m. on Sunday and everyone's there for it, well, we're telling them we could jump between Friday and Monday. It just depends when the weather's right. We're going. So
That's a
it's
crack
like
of
that.
dawn thing
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
want it to be light offshores.
But what I have coming up at my property, I'm doing Raha Fest. I bought it's like 15 acres. It's 10, but like it's out in the middle of nowhere, so I kind of carved out 15. Anyways, I got all these jumps, and I have the world's biggest quarter pipe right now, and I'm gonna be going for the Guinness Book of World Records quarter pipe highest air, which I have right now, but I'm gonna do a live. So I'm gonna try to get Danny Way and everyone out there to come watch that. And it's Raha Fest in November 2024, and I'd like to keep breaking records out there. So different distance stuff, and that's kind of what I have going up. It's rawville.mx on Instagram. So that's I do classes and stuff. But man, I can't get enough of the distance stuff. I think like the older I get, I'm doing all the X Games stuff and all the YouTube. But right now, I feel like no one's really in that lane. Like Mata was in it, Trigger, Capes. But now it's like in my generation, I love doing it, so I'm gonna try to take that on.
And Seth, we can't forget Seth.
Seth Enslow, of course.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, we could go on. Bird, the dude went 400 something feet. So there's a bunch of guys that kind of built all these numbers. Doug Danger.
Right on. So, getting back to that step down, that was another thing. I was there, but when Mickey Diamond did this step down in Ensenada on these dunes, and we dug the jump for him and got it all ready, and it was called the 1,000-mile jump, and Mickey showed up, and Mickey's just incredible, by the way. But we saw him do this step down. We dug it out, and it was over a road, and then he just over jumped it a little bit, and when he did it, he landed in kind of soft sand at Camar Dunes, right in Ensenada right there, and he wadded pretty good, and then he had to sit in the motorhome and he was just done. But that was pretty epic for those times. This was probably in 93 or probably 94 it was, but definitely pre FMX, pre jump shows. It was more like you were just going big, you were hitting kickers, and if somebody else hit it first, you're like, what gear? And then you're like, oh, it's third gear, 3/4 throttle, and then you'd run it a couple times, look at it, and then you would just go for it. And that's another thing too, was I remember when all of a sudden Dana and Jon Freeman showed up to this trade show in Vegas, and they had this new kid Seth along, and then they're like, oh, you got to see this footage, because on the way out they went to Dumont Dunes, and it was right after Seth just aired these dunes, and I remember seeing it just going, oh my gosh. And then that was an insane time in my life in motocross, because I was pretty gung-ho motocross for some years, and it was weird because it was just all in the very beginning stages, and it was interesting because it was like these snowboard guys, everybody started to ride motorcycles, like Palmer and Dana Danian and Noah Selaznick and Chris Roach, and so there was all these places where we'd all go ride, Hetzel and Brett Johnson and Don Zabo. And it was just really cool, and it was rad that Dana and John came up with, Creatures, or what was it, Crusty Demons of Dirt. I was thinking Creatures of Habit for a second. That was their snowboard film.
Yeah.
But Crusty Demons, and it was like all of a sudden motocross just started taking off, and it just became this thing where it was unstoppable. And then they started doing maybe a couple jump shows. I was at the first jump show in Las Vegas, but it really took a turn when Carey Hart did the backflip, and then I was also in the Crusty Demons when Pastrana showed up to Beaumont, when the Crusty guys flew Pastrana out, and I think he was about 16 or something.
Yeah, he's like 14, I think.
Yeah, maybe 14. I don't know. I was a young adult too. I was probably 21, but we rode with Pastrana, and then his ability, you could just see how good he was. He did this step down. I forget what the name of the jump is. It was like a diving board or something. And
I'm gonna grab this drink real quick. So I got no.
Yeah, but anyways, grab the Rockstar, folks. We're doing it. Rockstars in the house. No, but it was just a rad time and it was cool because it was like they couldn't control it because the
You guys were the first ones to really go out and do that.
Yeah,
like
but
at the time it was all racing.
Yeah, the motorsports people really didn't want it, and they were just so over it. And then it was like McGrath and Emmett crossed over, and they started filming with John and Dana. And then it was like all of a sudden this movie came out that became like a cult classic, and
Yep.
right there, just everything changed. And now
The Baker 3 of like Moto, like those movies are so rad because it was badass. No one was doing any of that yet. You guys were doing all that crazy free riding, which wasn't even a thing at the time. So like play riding, but then you guys ended up doing all that, but it was fun too. It was like that's the difference. It was fun. Like everybody was doing skits and fucking around and having a good time. So those movies are still hilarious, and the shit is still badass even today.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. Like if you put your heart to something, like they changed the whole industry, and now it's like you have freestyle motocross, supercross, outdoor, desert or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it actually became something where these kids who had more of a not hardcore, but kind of a little bit more attitude. Because I remember going to what is it called, Verona Oaks, and we would just hear this 80 just all right. You could hear the kid on the whole track, and they're like, "Oh, that's Twitch," and then and it's just funny how like he was just super good at racing and all the local tracks and all that. Well, I forget the name of the series, but it was like the Golden State Nationals, and all these races would go around. But then it's like now Twitch is huge, and they were all just kids. Everybody it was like a free for all. And then
That's Southern California for you, though. Like everything's there. I was telling someone, it's like all the sponsors are there, and all the hills, all the riding. Like you go out to like Arizona, it's flat. There's still a scene there. Those dudes, Chapter 11, they kill it. But like California has the hills.
we would go poach because there was no good supercross tracks because it was just like Paris, Glen Helen, Star West.
Yep.
But then we would go poach in Corona. Like we'd go to the Honda track or the Kawasaki track and sneak in and ride in like professional supercross tracks because that's where they train.
Yep. Yeah, it's all there. So like there's a huge scene out there, and that's where I gotta be.